containing an attempt to recover and reconstitute the lost origins of the myths and mysteries, types and symbols, religion and language, with Egypt for the mouthpiece and Africa as the birthplace.
You know, there is a specific, almost cozy comfort in looking at history as a timeline. It feels safe. It's a straight road. You have point A, the cause, then point B, the event, then point C, the consequence. You can drive back down that road, look at the mile markers and say, yes, this is exactly what happened and when.
It satisfies our deep psychological need for order. We like to think the past is just the present, but older.
And simpler.
And simpler.
Exactly. But then you pick a topic like the origins of religion, and not just any religion, but specifically the origins of Yahweh, the God of Israel. You start driving down that road, and suddenly the pavement doesn't just get bumpy, it dissolves.
Completely.
The road signs are in languages you don't speak: Ugaritic, Hieratic Egyptian, Paleo-Hebrew, and half of them contradict the other half.
It stops being a road and starts becoming a hall of mirrors. You think you're looking at a historical event, a man on a mountain, a burning bush, but you might actually be looking at a reflection of a later political agenda or a fragmented myth from a different culture or something else entirely.
And that is exactly where we are going today. We are walking right into that hall of mirrors. We are taking on a detective story that spans thousands of years.
It's a big bit.
We're going to be traversing the scorching copper mines of the Sinai Peninsula, digging through the ruins of ancient Egyptian temples, and crucially arguing in the lecture halls of modern universities. We are asking the big question: where did the God of Israel actually come from?
It is a massive question, maybe the biggest question in Western religious history. And to answer it, we have a really fascinating collision of sources today. It's almost like a cage match between two different ways of seeing the world.
Right. In one corner, we have the modern, rigorous academic view. We're using the work of the public scholar Dan McClellan, specifically his viral and highly detailed breakdown in the video, Where Did the God of Israel Come From?
And he's a great starting point.
Absolutely. This represents the consensus. This is the archaeology, the pottery shards, the inscriptions. It's the ground level view.
But then
we take a hard left turn.
A very sharp left turn into the deep dive zone. We are going to overlay a theoretical framework that completely upends that standard view.
And when we say upends, we mean it. We are dusting off the massive, dense, and frankly mind-bending volumes of the 19th century Egyptologist and poet Gerald Massey, specifically Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World, and the Natural Genesis.
And just to be clear, this isn't just some fringe idea we pulled out of nowhere. We're also bringing in support, like the controversial but compelling work of Martin Bernal and his book Black Athena, to give it context.
Right, to ask why Massey's ideas aren't more mainstream.
This is what I love about this specific topic.
Yeah.
We aren't just looking at when was this city built. We're looking at a theory that says the entire history of the Hebrew scriptures, the Exodus, the conquest, the Judges, might not be history at all.
That is the central thesis we have to wrestle with today. Dan McClellan will give us the accepted view that Yahweh evolved as a local West Semitic deity who got a promotion.
A big promotion.
But Gerald Massey, he contends that the Hebrew scriptures are actually a transmogrified version of Egyptian astronomical mythology.
Transmogrified. I love that word. It implies a change that distorts the original form, often in a grotesque or strange way.
It's perfect for this.
So Massey is arguing that what we read as the history of Israel is actually Egyptian star myths that got turned into a fake history.
Essentially, yes. Massey argues that for thousands of years, we have mistaken the exoteric, the outer shell, the literal story, for the esoteric, the inner, spiritual, and astronomical meaning. He posits that Yahweh isn't just a storm god who merged with a father god.
Yeah.
He argues Yahweh is a composite of the Egyptian Ihuh, the eternal father, and Ihuh, the ever-coming son.
Okay, hold on. My brain is already starting to tingle, but I want to pace ourselves.
Me too.
We've got the standard model, we've got Egyptian star charts, we've got the Black Athena theory of how history was whitewashed. It's a lot.
It is a lot, but if we take it piece by piece, the picture that emerges is startling. It forces you to rethink what you're actually reading when you open the Bible.
So where do we begin?
So let's start on solid ground. Let's establish the baseline before we jump into the deep end. Let's look at the standard model as laid out by scholars like Dan McClellan.
Right, and McClellan's a great guide for this because he sticks very strictly to the data. He is not doing theology, he is doing history and philology. He's looking at the evidence on the ground.
So when a modern academic asks, where did Yahweh come from? They don't start with theology, they start with dirt. What is the first piece of physical evidence they pull out of the ground?
They look for the name, they look for Israel, and they look for Yahweh. And McClellan points out a very uncomfortable fact for people who take the Bible literally as a chronological history.
Which is?
The earliest evidence we have for the people of Israel doesn't actually mention Yahweh at all.
Not a word. This is the Merneptah stele.
Correct. This is a massive granite victory stele erected by the pharaoh Merneptah around 1208 BCE. Merneptah was the son of Ramses II, Ramses the Great.
The famous one.
The very one. And in this inscription, he's bragging about smashing all his enemies in Canaan. He lists cities like Ashkelon and Gezer and Yanoam. And then near the bottom, he mentions a people group. Israel is laid waste. His seed is not.
Friendly guy. Seeds is not. That sounds like total annihilation.
Oh, it's classic pharaonic propaganda.
Yeah.
You know, I crush my enemies, they're gone forever. But the key here is the hieroglyphics, the way it's written.
How so?
For the cities like Ashkelon, he uses a determinative symbol, a little picture at the end of the word that means city or territory. It tells you it's a place with walls and borders.
Okay.
But for Israel, he uses a different symbol. He uses the symbol for people or tribe.
So not a nation state.
Exactly. This tells us that in 1208 BCE, from the Egyptian point of view, Israel wasn't a kingdom with a capital city. It was a group of people, a tribal confederation, roaming around the central highlands of Canaan.
Okay, so we have a tribal group called Israel. But McClellan makes a big deal about the name Israel itself.
Right, and this is linguistic archaeology. You have to break the word down. Israel.
Isra.
In Semitic languages, that translates roughly to El contends, or God rules. The crucial syllable there is El.
And El isn't just a generic word for God here, is it? It's a specific proper name.
It is. In the Canaanite pantheon, the religion of the area that predates the Bible, El, was the high god, the CEO, the patriarch.
To the head of the board.
The head of the board, exactly. If you look at the Ugaritic texts found at Rosh Hashanah, El is described very specifically. He's the father of years. He is the bull El. He is benevolent, wise, elderly, and often depicted sitting on a throne with a beard.
So he's the grandfather figure.
Precisely. He heads the divine council. He isn't out there fighting battles. He's the administrator. He signs off on things. The fact that this tribe is named Israel suggests pretty strongly that originally their patron deity was El.
So they were the people of El.
Correct. Not the people of Yahweh. If they were originally the people of Yahweh, they probably would have been called Israelahu or something similar with the Yahu element in the name.
That makes sense. So when does Yahweh show up? Because today, obviously, the God of Israel is Yahweh.
Well, this is the first big mystery. We have to fast forward almost 400 years to find the name Yahweh clearly linked to Israel in the archaeological record outside of the Bible.
400 years, that's a huge gap. That's like the time between us and Shakespeare.
It is. A lot can happen in 400 years. We go to the Mesha stele around 840 BCE.
The Mesha stele, what's that?
It's a Moabite inscription, ironically, written by an enemy of Israel, King Mesha of Moab. He's complaining about how Omri, the king of Israel, oppressed his people. And in his victory lap, he mentions that he took the vessels of YHWH from the Israelites and dragged them before his own god, Chemosh.
Okay, so by 840 BCE, the branding has definitely changed.
Definitely.
They are now the people of Yahweh, but this leaves a huge gap. Somewhere between 1200 BCE and 800 BCE, they swapped gods, or at least swapped management. Where does McClellan and the standard academic consensus say Yahweh came from? Because he wasn't part of that original Canaanite lineup with El and Baal and Astarte, was he?
No, he seems to be a complete outsider. He's an immigrant deity.
An immigrant god. I like that.
McClellan, following the Shasu hypothesis, which is widely accepted now, points to the south.
The south, like Egypt.
Not Egypt proper, but the borderlands, the wilderness. We have Egyptian inscriptions from the 14th and 13th centuries BCE, so older than the Merneptah stele from the temples of Soleb and Amara West.
So pre-Israel.
Pre-Israel is a known entity, yes. These lists mention a group called the Shasu.
Shasu, who were they?
The Shasu were nomads, Bedouin-like wanderers. The Egyptians saw them as troublesome groups on their borders. They lived in the regions of Edom and Midian. Geographically, that is southern Jordan, the Negev Desert, and northwestern Saudi Arabia today.
So it's harsh, arid country, copper mines, canyons.
The wilderness, the place where Moses supposedly flees after killing the Egyptian.
Right, he flees to Midian.
Exactly, and the inscriptions refer to the land of the Shasu of YHW.
Yo, that sounds tantalizingly close.
It's linguistically identical to the first part of Yahweh. Most scholars think YHW, pronounced Yahu, was the name of the territory, or perhaps the name of the god who lived in that territory, the patron deity of these Shasu nomads.
And what kind of god was this Yahu from the southern deserts? He wasn't the grandfatherly CEO type like El?
Not at all. The geography dictates the theology here. This is a land of copper smelting, intense heat, mountains, and sudden violent flash floods. The theory is that Yahweh originated as a divine warrior, a storm god.
A storm god. So we're talking Zeus, Thor, Baal, that kind of energy.
Similar energy. Think thunder, lightning, dark clouds marching from the desert to destroy enemies. The biblical texts actually preserve this if you know where to look. McClellan points out the archaic poetry in the Bible passages like the Song of Deborah in Judges 5 or Moses' blessing in Deuteronomy 33.
What do those say?
They say things like, Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the fields of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens poured down water.
Seir and Edom, that's the south.
That's exactly where the Shasu lived. It describes a warrior deity marching up from the south, from Edom and Teman, to come aid his people in their battles in the north. He's a god of weather and war.
Okay, so I'm seeing the picture the standard model paints. You have the proto-Israelites in the highlands of Canaan worshiping El, the peaceful CEO. And then perhaps through trade or migration, maybe the Canaanites or Midianites, they encounter this young, brash warrior storm god coming up from the southern deserts, Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
How do these two very different figures become the one God of the Bible?
The mechanism is called conflation. It's a merger. It's a theological and political process where two or more deities are fused into one.
Like a corporate acquisition.
In a way, yes. Imagine you are a king in early Israel. You're trying to unite these disparate tribes.
Yeah.
You need a god who has the authority and wisdom of El, the father of the house, to handle the domestic issues, the laws, the lineage.
The peacetime God.
Right. But you are also surrounded by enemies. Philistines, Moabites, Assyrians. You need the martial power of Yahweh, the divine warrior, to fight your battles. A peaceful old man isn't going to cut it when the Ammonites are at the gate.
So you just smash them together.
Over time, yes. It was probably a slow process. The attributes of the two merged. We see this in the text. Yahweh starts being called Father. He starts sitting on the divine council, a role that used to belong to El.
He takes over El's job.
He takes over El's job and also El's wife.
Wait, El had a wife?
Oh, absolutely. Asherah was the mother goddess, the consort of El. She was a major deity. She was represented by the stylized tree or pole, the Asherah pole you see condemned all the time in the Bible.
Right. The prophets are always railing against the Asherah poles.
Because people were worshiping her.
Yeah.
And there are archaeological finds in Israel, like the famous Pithos sherds from Kuntalit Ashrud, that have inscriptions that actually say, to Yahweh and his Asherah.
Yahweh and his Asherah. That implies a divine couple, like Zeus and Hera.
It does. It seems that when Yahweh took over El's job as the head of the pantheon, he took over his marriage too. He absorbed the family business, lock, stock, and barrel.
That is scandalous to modern ears. But it makes sense politically. You create a super deity by combining the best traits of the existing pantheon. It's logical. It fits the pottery shards. It fits the inscriptions. It's a tidy evolutionary history.
It is. It's the safe, straight road we talked about at the beginning. It explains the discrepancies in the Bible, why God sometimes seems like a peaceful father and sometimes like a raging warrior. Because he's a composite character.
But yes, this is where we pivot. Because if you sit down with Gerald Massey, and remember, this is a guy who spent decades teaching himself hieroglyphics, reading the Egyptian Book of the Dead in the original language, and writing thousands of pages of comparative mythology, he would say that this standard model is looking at the world through a keyhole.
Massey would say that McClellan is analyzing the exoteric debris, the political maneuvering of Iron Age tribes, and missing the esoteric ocean that these tribes were swimming in.
So Massey suggests that this conflation isn't just two local gods getting pasted together.
Right. He argues that what looks like a merger to us is actually a fragmented memory of a much older, highly sophisticated theological system that didn't originate in Canaan at all.
It originated in Egypt.
It originated in Egypt.
Let's get into the linguistics then. This is where Massey really throws down the gauntlet. McClellan says Yahweh is likely a verb form he causes to be, or related to that Shasu place name. What does Massey say?
Massey goes straight to the Egyptian dictionary. He challenges the storm god origin entirely. He says that's a misreading. He identifies the Hebrew tetragrammaton, YHWH, not with a storm, but with the Egyptian concept of Hui.
Hui, Huhi. Break that down for me. Is that a god?
Hui isn't a name of a specific god so much as a title or a state of being. It was applying to the highest gods, Ta, Atum-Ra, Osiris. It means the eternal, the everlasting, or literally he who is.
He who is. That rings a massive bell.
It should. Think of the pivotal moment in Exodus chapter 3. Moses is at the burning bush. He asks God, who should I say sent me? And God doesn't say, I am the storm god of Edom. He says, I am that I am. In Hebrew, I, Asher, I.
A statement of pure being.
Pure being. And Massey connects this to the Egyptian phrase nuk pu nuk, which translates to I am he who I am. It's a declaration of self-existent, eternal being. Massey argues that the Hebrew scribes were literally translating an Egyptian theological title.
So Massey is claiming that the very name of God in the Bible, the core concept of I am, is an Egyptian title for the eternal.
Precisely. But here's the deep dive twist. He says Jehovah, or Yahweh, isn't just one word, it's a compound.
A compound word, like lighthouse.
Yes. You have Huhi, the Father, the eternal spirit, the I am. But in Egyptian theology, the Father is hidden. He is abstract. He needs a way to interact with the world. He needs a manifester, a sun. In Egyptian myth, specifically the solar theology, there was a concept of the ever-coming sun, the one who reveals the Father. The Egyptian word for to come, or the coming one, is Ihuh or Io.
Ihuh.
Or sometimes rendered Ia. It's the name of the sun as the one who comes. The Messiah, if you will.
The coming one.
Now combine them. If you take the coming son, and Hui, the eternal Father, put them together phonetically, Ihuh, Yahuhi.
Yahuhi, yeah.
That is Massey's central thesis. He argues that the name Yahweh encapsulates the entire Egyptian theological system of the one God who is dual in nature, the hidden Father, Huhi, and the revealed Son, Io.
Whoa, okay. Let me process that. So the standard model sees a political merger. Let's take the old guy El and the warrior guy Yahweh and combine them for political stability.
Right.
Massey sees a theological continuity. The God of Israel is the Egyptian Atum-Ra, who was always both father and son.
Exactly. Massey calls the Israelites the Ihuh, the worshippers of Ihuh, the coming sun. He argues they didn't invent monotheism in the desert. They carried the sophisticated solar monotheism of Egypt out with them.
So they weren't creating something new, they were preserving something old.
Preserving the wisdom of Egypt when the Egyptian empire itself was collapsing into polytheistic chaos.
This actually touches on another name McClellan mentioned, Adonai.
Right. McClellan notes that Adonai, Lord, appears later in the text and becomes the substitute spoken name for Yahweh because Yahweh became too holy to pronounce.
And the standard scholarship says it comes from the Semitic root Adon, meaning master or lord. Simple enough.
Simple enough. But Massey, again, looks to Egypt. He points to the Aten.
The Aten, as in Akhenaten, the famous heretic pharaoh.
The very same. Akhenaten tried to ban all the other gods and focus worship solely on the Aten, the physical disk of the sun, the Lord of light. Massey draws a direct line from the Egyptian Aten to the Hebrew Adonai.
So the Lord of the Bible is the solar disk of Akhenaten.
Conceptually, yes, or at least derived from that same theological stream. Massey suggests that the struggle we see in the Bible, the constant war between Yahweh and the Elohim or the other gods, is actually a reflection of the religious wars in Egypt.
What do you mean?
In Egypt, you had the older cults, stellar cults, lunar cults, animal cults. Massey associates these with the Elohim or the powers, the plural gods. Then you had the rise of solar monotheism, Atum-Ra, the Aten.
So when the Bible describes Yahweh smashing the altars of the other gods, that's not just tribal warfare, that's a theological software update.
It's solar monotheism 2.0 overriding stellar polytheism 1.0. And Massey argues the Hebrews were the ones who kept the source code for the solar 2.0 system. They were the purists of the Atenu theology.
But here's the problem with that theory, and I have to play devil's advocate here.
Please.
If they kept the Egyptian source code, why is the story set in Canaan? Why do we have this whole saga of the Exodus, the wandering in the desert, the conquest of Jericho? McClellan and modern archaeologists spend careers digging in the Sinai looking for evidence of the Exodus.
They do.
They look for campsites, they look for pottery, and mostly they find nothing.
They find nothing. And Massey would say, of course they find nothing. They're looking for footprints in the sand when they should be looking at the stars.
This brings us to the most radical part of his theory. And you know, if you're listening, strap in for this because it changes everything.
It does. Massey argues that the Exodus is not a historical event that happened in the Sinai Peninsula. He argues it is a mythological representation of the journey of the soul through the underworld.
Okay, stop. That is a massive shift. You're telling me that Moses leading the people out of Egypt isn't a story about refugees escaping slavery. It's a story about dying.
According to Massey, yes. It's a story about the soul's journey after death or through spiritual initiation. We need to reorient our map. The Egypt of the Bible is not the geopolitical country on the Nile. It is the lower Egypt of Amenta.
Amenta, define that.
In Egyptian cosmology, Amenta is the hidden earth, the underworld. It's the place the sun goes when it sets in the west. It travels through this dark, dangerous tunnel all night to rise again in the east. It is a place of trials, of darkness, of barren wastes.
The desert, the wilderness.
Exactly. The wilderness of the Bible is the spiritual wilderness the soul must traverse to reach the promised land. And what is the promised land in Egyptian myth? It's the Ihuh, the field of reeds, the paradise in the east where the sun rises.
This gives a whole new meaning to wandering for 40 years. It's not about getting lost. It's about purification. The number 40 is symbolic of a period of trial.
Right. And Massey connects it all to the Book of the Dead, or, to use its actual Egyptian title, the Ihuh, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. He argues this book is the blueprint for the biblical Exodus. And when you look at the parallels he draws, it gets spooky.
Give me an example. What's a parallel that stands out?
Okay, take the Red Sea. In the biblical story, it's a physical barrier of water that parts.
Right. Miraculously.
In the Egyptian underworld map, there is a specific obstacle called the Lake of Petrata. It is a lake of fire or boiling blood. The soul has to cross it to be safe from its pursuers.
And the enemies. Pharaoh and his chariots.
In the Egyptian myth, as the sun god and the soul travels through the underworld, he is chased by the great serpent Apap and his sabot, his fiends. They try to swallow the sun.
The forces of darkness.
The forces of darkness. But ultimately they are drowned in the lake of blood. Massey argues that the Pharaoh of Exodus is simply the historicized version of the Apap dragon, the dragon who drowns in the water.
So the dragon becomes the tyrant king. The lake of fire becomes the Red Sea. And the soul becomes Israel.
Israel represents the children of Ra, the souls who are enlightened, who are following the light. And Massey even analyzes the 12 tribes. He says, don't look for 12 biological clans, look at the sky.
The zodiac.
The 12 tribes represent the 12 astronomical divisions of the solar heaven. As the sun travels through the year, it visits the 12 houses. The camp of Israel, arranged around the tabernacle in the book of Numbers, is a mirror of the stars arranged around the pole.
It's an astronomical map, not a genealogical tree.
That is his contention. And he centers this on the figure of Moses. McClellan views Moses as a legendary founder figure, maybe based on a real guy, maybe not.
A culture hero.
A culture hero. But Massey looks at the iconography of Moses and sees a god.
Which god?
Shu, or Shu on her.
I'm not familiar with Shu.
In Egyptian myth, Shu is the lifter of heaven. He is the god of the air. He is often depicted standing with his arms raised, holding up the sky to separate it from the earth goddess Nut.
Wait, arms raised? Like Moses during the battle against the Amalekites.
The story where, as long as Moses held his hands up, Israel prevailed.
Exactly.
That is iconic imagery of Shu. But it goes deeper. Shu is known as the one who brings the writings of Ra to the people from the mount. Moses brings the tablets.
The lawgiver.
Massey even plays with the name. The Hebrew name Moshe is traditionally said to mean drawn from the water. Massey finds this unconvincing. He links it to Mashu. In Egyptian, Ma is truth or law. Shu is the god, the lion god of truth.
Mashu, Moshe, it's close.
It's very close. And Shu is the deity who leads the souls across the desert of Amenta. He is the psychopomp, the guide of the dead.
It's incredibly consistent. If you accept the premise that the Hebrew scribes took these Egyptian myths and wrote them down as if they were human history, a lot of the weirdness of the Bible suddenly makes sense.
It resolves the lack of archaeological evidence. We don't find the Exodus in the sands of Sinai because, as Massey says, it was never meant to be there. It was a drama of the soul, transmogrified into a national history.
There's that word again, transmogrified. It's like taking the script of Star Wars and rewriting it as a history of the American Civil War. The themes are there, the heroes are there, but the setting is completely wrong.
A perfect analogy. And speaking of Star Wars and space, we need to look at the sky again. The glory of the Lord. This is one of the most famous images in the Bible. The fire on the mountain.
Right. McClellan, following the standard model, sees this as storm imagery, correct?
Right. If Yahweh is a storm god, a Baalist figure, then the glory is the thunderstorm. The dark cloud, the flashing fire, the rumbling voice. It's a volcano or a tempest on Mount Sinai.
Which fits the Shasuth theory perfectly. The god from the southern mountains brings his mountain weather with him.
It does. But Massey looks at the mountain of God, whether it's Sinai or Zion, and he sees the astronomical equinox.
The equinox. How does a point in time become a mountain?
In ancient astronomy, the mount is the horizon point where the sun rises from the underworld. Specifically, the vernal equinox, the start of the year. The Mount of Glory is the sunrise, the moment the sun god is resurrected from the darkness of Amenta.
Okay, so the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day that leads the Israelites.
Massey identifies this with the zodiacal light. This is a real astronomical phenomenon, very visible in clear desert skies like Egypt's. It's a cone of faint, diffuse light that appears on the horizon before sunrise or after sunset.
I've seen pictures of that. It really does look like a pillar.
It literally looks like a pillar of light standing on the mount of the horizon.
So the glory isn't a storm, it's the light of the sun heralding the dawn.
The dawn of the new year, the resurrection of the light.
But what about the animals? One of the most famous stories is the golden calf. The Israelites get bored waiting for Moses, they build a golden calf, and Yahweh gets furious. Standard interpretation. Idolatry is bad, don't worship statues.
A simple moral lesson. Massey, however, interprets this through the precession of the equinoxes.
Okay, we need to explain that simply. What is precession?
Imagine the Earth is a spinning top. It's not just spinning, it's also wobbling very, very slowly.
Yeah.
A full wobble takes about 26,000 years. Because of this wobble, the constellation that rises behind the sun at the vernal equinox changes over time. It takes about 20,160 years to move through one sign of the zodiac.
Okay, the age of Aquarius and all that.
Exactly. So go back in history. For roughly 2,000 years, from about 4,000 BCE to 2000 BCE, the sun rose in the constellation of Taurus, the bull.
The bull, the golden calf.
Right. But around the time of the Exodus, symbolically, not literally, the equinox was shifting from Taurus into Aries, the ram, or the lamb.
So the golden calf represented the old age, the old religion.
The expiring age. The Israelites worshiping the calf were clinging to the old astronomical era. It wasn't just idolatry in the moral sense, it was being astronomically incorrect. They were failing to update the celestial calendar.
And Moses destroys the calf because?
Because the new dispensation has arrived, the age of the ram. This is why the central act of the Exodus, the thing that saves them from the angel of death, is the Passover lamb.
The Lamb of God.
It's not just a nice metaphor for innocence. It's a celestial timestamp. It marks the shift into the age of Aries. Yahweh is asserting himself as the God of the current age, displacing the gods of the previous age.
That is mind-blowing. It turns a moral story into a timekeeping story.
And it explains the lion imagery too, the Lion of Judah.
Oh, right. Yahweh is often called a lion. He roars from Zion.
Massey links this to Ihuh again. In the Egyptian ritual, the sun god, at the height of his power, the summer solstice in the constellation of Leo, was depicted as a lion. The lion represents the double force, the heat, the power.
So Yahweh isn't just one animal. He adopts the iconography of the sun in all its phases.
The bull of the old age, the lamb of the new age, the lion of the summer solstice, it's all zodiacal.
And then there's the donkey, the ass.
Yes.
This is the one I really want to hear about, because I've heard rumors about this and it sounds bizarre.
It's a strange corner of history. There were ancient accusations from Gnostics and Romans like Tacitus that the Jews worshipped a donkey-headed god in the temple. It sounds like a slanderous insult.
Like calling them stubborn.
But Massey takes it seriously as iconography. He connects it to Sut, or Seth.
Seth, the Egyptian chaos god, the bad guy who killed Osiris.
Later, he was the bad guy. But in the earliest Egyptian cycles, Seth was a benevolent deity. He was the opener of the rose in the desert. He was the god of the foreign lands, the wilderness. And his totem animal, the Seth animal, which looks suspiciously like an ass or a donkey.
The Shasu connection again, the desert god.
In a way, Seth was the lord of the wilderness, the lord of storms. Sound familiar?
Yahweh, the storm god from Edom.
Massey suggests that Yahweh absorbed attributes of Seth, the ass desert storm, and merged them into the solar theology. It explains why Yahweh has that dark side, the wrath, the jealousy, the connection to the wilderness. He isn't just the shiny sun god. He's also the dangerous god of the wasteland.
It's like Yahweh is a magnet rolling through history, picking up pieces of Seth, pieces of Adam, pieces of Shu, pieces of the golden calf, and fusing them into one Lord.
And that brings us to the big question. If the linguistic connections are so strong, Ihuh to Yahweh, Aten to Odin, Mosh to Moses, why isn't this the standard view? Why does Dan McClellan, who is a brilliant scholar, focus on the Shasu and Canaanites and barely mention Egypt except as a source of loanwords?
This is Section 5, the Black Athena factor. This is where we have to talk about the politics of history.
We have to bring in Martin Bernal. His book, Black Athena, caused a firestorm when it was published in the 1980s. His argument, essentially, is that the ancient model of history, which the Greeks themselves believed, acknowledged that Greece in the Near East learned everything from Egypt.
The Greeks admitted it.
Freely. Herodotus, Plato, Pythagoras, they all claimed to have gone to Egypt to learn wisdom. They saw Egypt as the mother of civilization.
What happened?
Bernal argues that in the 18th and 19th centuries, European scholarship created a new Aryan model.
What drove that change?
According to Bernal, it was racism and romanticism. As Europe was colonizing Africa and the East, European scholars couldn't stomach the idea that the pure roots of Western civilization, Greece and the Bible, came from Africa.
They wanted a white origin.
They wanted Indo-European roots, so they systematically purged Semitic and African influences from the history books. They emphasized the Indo-European genius of Greece and the isolated genius of Israel. They wanted the Israelites to be unique, distinct from the pagans in Egypt. They created a hermetically sealed history for the Bible.
So when Massey was writing in the late 19th century, connecting Yahweh to Egyptian gods was, well, it was heresy, academically speaking.
It was. It went against the grain of the entire academic establishment, which was obsessed with German higher criticism and Aryan linguistics. Massey was dismissed not because his philology was impossible, his etymologies are often quite sound, but because of an ideological refusal to accept Egypt as the source.
And Bernal introduces this concept of competitive plausibility.
Right. He asks a simple question. Is it more plausible that the Hebrews, who spent centuries on the borders of Egypt, developed a complex theology completely independent of the dominant culture next door? Or is it more plausible that they adapted the deep monotheistic trends of Edom-Ra worship?
Especially when you consider the Hyksos.
The Hyksos are the smoking gun for Bernal. They were Semitic rulers, shepherd kings, who actually conquered Lower Egypt and ruled it for over a century. They worshipped Sutek, a form of Seth.
So here we have Semitic people living in Egypt, worshipping a god that looks a lot like the early storm god Yahweh.
Exactly. And when the Egyptians finally kicked the Hyksos out, where did they go? They went into Canaan. They fortified Jerusalem.
So you have a mechanism. You have a people group moving from Egypt to Canaan, carrying the worship of a Seth-like deity.
That is the deep dive synthesis. It provides a historical bridge for Massey's theological claims. We don't have to choose between history and myth. The history supports the transmission of the myth.
So let's try to land the plane. We have McClellan's standard model, conflation of El and Yahweh. We have Massey's Egyptian model, continuity of father and son. Can we harmonize them, or are they just talking past each other?
I think we can synthesize them. McClellan talks about conflation. He sees a political merger. Massey sees a theological continuity.
Explain that difference one more time.
McClellan sees two distinct statues, El and Yahweh, getting glued together by a king for political reasons. Massey sees the one god of Egypt, Omra, who's already dual. Adhim was the father, Huhi. Ihuh was the son, Ihuh. When this theology moved into Canaan, it encountered the local names.
So El becomes the placeholder for the father aspect.
Exactly. The Israelites take the local high god El and map the Egyptian father attributes onto him. And Yahweh becomes the name for the active revealing son aspect, Ihuh.
So the conflation wasn't just a political trick. It was a restoration of the Egyptian esoteric system using local Canaanite vocabulary.
That's the Massey argument. The God of Israel becomes unique because he represents the synthesis of all these previous powers, or Elohim, into a single abstract God in truth. He eats the other gods.
And it even touches on the female principle. McClellan noted that Yahweh absorbed Asherah, the wife of El.
Massey would take that much deeper. He points out that in the oldest Egyptian myths, the Great Mother, personified as the goddess Typhon, or the dragon of the deep, was the primary deity. It was matriarchy. The rise of Yahweh represents the shift from matriarchy to patriarchy in religious history.
The casting out of Hagar in the story of Abraham?
Look at the name, Hagar. In Hebrew, it's related to hag flight, or migration. But Massey sees this as the casting out of the old mother goddess religion, the bondwoman, Egypt, to establish the rule of the father-son deity. The dragon is demonized, the Great Mother is suppressed.
It's a takeover, a cosmic theological takeover.
It is, and it shaped the next 3,000 years of human history.
So where does this leave us? We've gone from pottery shards in the Negev to star charts in Thebes. We've turned the Exodus from a refugee march into a soul journey.
It leaves us with a profound question about the nature of truth in religion.
And that's our provocative thought for the outro. If Massey is right, and the history of the Bible is actually mythology, does that make it less true?
That is the dangerous question. We are trained by our modern education to think that history equals fact equals truth. If it didn't physically happen at a specific coordinate on a map on a specific date, it's a lie.
But the Egyptians didn't think that way.
No. They valued gnosis knowledge, not knowledge of dates and battles, but knowledge of the soul's eternal nature. If the Exodus is a map of the soul's journey through the trials of life, the wilderness, to reach enlightenment, the promised land, then it is true every single day for every single person.
It's a blueprint for spiritual development.
It is, but by reading it as a history book, we may have lost the gnosis. We treat it as a record of a tribal war god, rather than a universal blueprint for the human spirit. We are arguing over the pottery while ignoring the stars.
So is the God of Israel a tribal storm deity from the Shasu lands who got a promotion? Or is he the first attempt to universalize the Egyptian concept of the eternal residing within us?
That, my friend, is for you to decide. But once you see the connection, once you see the Ihuh in Yahweh, the Etan in Adonai, you can never look at the dark sayings of old quite the same way again.
You certainly can't. Thank you for taking this journey with us. Keep digging, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Stay curious.
Containing an attempt to recover and reconstitute the lost origins of the myths and mysteries, types and symbols, religion and language, with Egypt for the mouthpiece and Africa as the birthplace.